Have you ever noticed how everything starts to shift the moment you set a boundary? You don't raise your voice. You don't need to explain. You simply say no, and suddenly people act differently. The dynamic changes. The energy moves. It's almost as if your silence has more power than your words. Now imagine if you did the same. Imagine if you stopped reaching, explaining, apologizing. If you didn't rush to fix their discomfort just to escape your own. What if, instead of reflexively reacting, you simply paused, no defense, no overthinking, no pleasing, just a stillness, a sacred refusal to abandon yourself? What if, instead of chasing connection at the cost of your peace, you chose space? What if silence wasn't weakness, but wisdom? What if the very act of pulling back isn't the end of the relationship, but the beginning of your self-respect? Because Freud taught us, the unconscious doesn't lie. And the moment you stop rescuing others to avoid your own pain, you start hearing what your soul has been whispering all along. This is not rejection. This is reclamation. The moment you stop being endlessly available, emotionally, physically, psychologically, the people around you begin to shift. Some pull back, some lash out. Some pretend nothing's changed, but they feel it deeply. Why? Because they were never engaging with your soul. They were engaging with your availability, your guilt, your programming, your unconscious need to prove you are enough by being useful. Always useful. You see, people get comfortable feeding off your patterns. They get used to the way you answer at the first ring, the way you say yes before you even check in with yourself, the way you offer help before it's even asked for, as if your default setting is self-sacrifice. And when you stop, when you pause instead of respond, when you let their discomfort exist without rushing in to soothe it, when you choose yourself, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, everything shifts. Because your reactions were a form of control, not yours theirs. People could manipulate you by playing on your instincts. They'd weaponize your empathy, twist your kindness into obligation, make your silence feel like guilt, make your no feel like betrayal. And you let it happen, not because you were weak, but because part of you is afraid that setting boundaries meant losing love. But it doesn't. It only removes the illusion of it. Freud said, most people do not really want freedom because freedom involves responsibility, and most people are frightened of responsibility. And that includes responsibility for their own emotions. So they project, they dump. They offload pain onto whoever will absorb it without protest. When you are always available, you became the emotional landfill, the one they called in crisis, but forgot in celebration, the one they drained because they assumed you could take it. But boundaries challenge this fantasy. They remind people that you are not an extension of their will, that you are not a character in their emotional play, that you are a whole, breathing human being with limits, needs, and sovereignty. And so yes, when you become less available, things fall apart. People get angry. Some disappear. Some try harder to win you back, not because they love you, but because they miss the version of you they controlled. But the version of you that kept giving, that version was bleeding beneath the smile. That version thought love was earned through suffering. That version needed to die so you could be reborn with dignity. This is not about being cold. This is not about withdrawing from the world. This is about knowing where you end and where someone else begins. It's about reclaiming the inner compass you outsourced for years. It's about honoring your nervous system, your energy, your truth. Because when you stop being predictable, you stop being programmable. When you stop being available to everyone, you become unmistakably valuable to the right ones. It's not just about saying no. It's about becoming someone they can no longer manipulate, someone they can no longer guilt into silence, someone whose peace is no longer up for negotiation, That's the paradox. You lose people, but you find yourself. And when you finally return to your own center, you realize the people who truly see you never needed your sacrifice to love you. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." So ask yourself this: when you become quiet, when you become unavailable, when you stop responding to every emotional fire alarm, who gets desperate? Who suddenly needs an answer, a reaction, an explanation? Who tries to provoke you? Not to connect, but to control. Because that reaction, that irritation, it tells you everything. The people who feel entitled to your time, your peace, your presence, will always scream the loudest when you withdraw a dot. It's not your absence that hurts them. It's the loss of power they had over your presence. Freud spent his life peeling back the layers of our unconscious mind, that hidden realm beneath logic and awareness, where childhood wounds, unmet needs, and primitive drives shape our behavior without us even realizing it. He believed that much of what we do is not rational. It's reactive. It's emotional. It's ancient dot, so when someone lashes out at your boundary, they're not just responding to you. They're reacting to every unresolved rejection they've ever buried. Every time they felt unseen. Every time love was withheld unless they performed. You just happened to be the stage. In psychoanalytic terms, this is called projection. Freud described it as the defense mechanism of assigning one's own unacceptable thoughts or emotions to someone else. So, when you start setting limits, when you begin honoring your peace, people don't see it as your growth. They see it as betrayal. Because in their mind, your availability was never a gift. It was a given. You were supposed to always answer, always agree, always absorb. They didn't love you. They loved what you did for their anxiety. Jung took this further. He said that when we become irritated by someone's behavior, it often reveals a part of ourselves we haven't integrated. So when your silence irritates them, what they're really reacting to is the emptiness they don't want to face, the loneliness they've avoided, the dependency they've disguised as love. You're no longer the shield that protects them from themselves. And that creates chaos, not just externally, but internally. When you were always available, you became their unconscious outlet, a vessel, a mirror, a dumping ground for everything they refused to process. You allowed it, not because you lacked strength, but because part of you may have believed this is what love requires. But the truth Freud tried to illuminate was this: much of what we call love is often need, dressed in affection. It's trauma searching for safety. It's inner wounds trying to heal through someone else's presence. So when you stop playing that role, you don't just disrupt the relationship. You disrupt the entire emotional ecosystem it was built on. Now those same people must sit with themselves, with their discomfort, with their history, with their shadow. And that's the hardest thing to do. Because when you become less available, the fantasy collapses. The illusion breaks. People are no longer relating to the real you. They're confronting themselves. And most people aren't ready for that kind of truth. But here's the beauty. The moment you stop overfunctioning in other people's stories is the moment you begin to author your own. Boundaries don't break bonds. They reveal which bonds were built on your exhaustion. Here's the part nobody tells you. Your excessive availability? It's not kindness. It's not nobility. It's not even selflessness. It's a psychological trap. A hidden contract. A prison built out of approval and fear. Most of us are conditioned, subtly, consistently, to believe that being endlessly accessible is the highest form of virtue. Always being there. Always listening. Always giving just one more piece of yourself. But if Freud were here, he wouldn't call it compassion. He'd call it a survival strategy, a behavioral pattern etched into your psyche long before you had the words to name it. He would ask, What if your availability is not about love, but about fear? Fear of being disliked, fear of being replaced, fear of being too much or not enough, fear that if you stop giving, they'll stop staying. So you give, and you give, and you give, until you're not offering love. You're offering proof. Proof that you're good. Proof that you're safe to love. Proof that you're worthy. And you start to equate your value with how much you can tolerate. How much of yourself you can lose before anyone even notices you're fading. You call it loyalty. They call it love. But deep down, it's exhaustion wearing a smile. And here's the hardest truth. Your availability has become currency in a game you never agreed to play. A game where your silence is expected, your empathy is exploited, and your boundaries are seen as obstacles. Some people only love you because you are easy to access. Not because of who you are, but because of what you give. Take that access away, and their version of love evaporates. Because to them, your value is conditional, rooted not in your essence, but in your availability. The moment you say, no, you become selfish. The moment you need space, you're called distant. The moment you stop sacrificing, you become too much or not enough. But the truth? You were never too much. You were just in the wrong rooms. Rooms that applauded your compliance and rejected your truth. Rooms that celebrated your exhaustion and punished your boundaries. You stop apologizing for your needs because you've learned that the right people don't punish your distance. They honor your return. They don't just tolerate your limits. They hold space for them. Boundaries don't filter out love. They filter out attachment dressed as love. And what's left is real. What's left is freedom, not the loud kind, but the steady, rooted kind that lives in your chest. The kind that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't shrink. Freud once said, unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. But when you set boundaries, you stop burying your truth. You stop packaging your pain to make it more palatable. You stop editing yourself to be more acceptable. This is transformation, not because you became someone else, but because you finally came home to yourself. You're no longer living in reaction. You're no longer playing a role. You are living in alignment, with intention, with emotional honesty, with self-respect. And that is not just a shift. It is your return. If this message spoke to something deep in you, if you're ready to step into that quiet, unshakable power, take a moment to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this with someone who's still learning to protect their peace. Thank you for watching. Thank you for choosing yourself. And thank you for honoring your energy. I'll see you in the next one.